Welcome again to Religion for the Rest of Us. I'm still in harried video editing mode. Just to get through all these comments, I actually shot about an hour, and I'm trying to trim as much of that down as I can. So let's dive back in. Comments. Keep them coming. Well, Bachelor Snout came in and agreed with 12 at 5's comment above that I just discussed. It says, agreed, and further, where Sam Harris doesn't have a specific education in his studying the neurology of belief, isolating which parts of our brain are active, well, we believe or disbelieve the truth of various propositions, whether religious, political, logical, mathematical, etc. Sam's research indicated that our brains don't appear to do anything different or special when we believe or disbelieve religious propositions compared to other categories of belief. Sam's criticism of religion rests on the consequences of belief. So, whether Sam himself is a religious scholar is irrelevant to this avenue of criticism. What matters is whether significant numbers of people truly believe some of the noxious religious dogma that they claim to believe. Well, spatulist out, what I would argue is that Sam Harris, in attempting to study religious belief, would first need to actually understand what religious belief is and how it functions. To say that you can isolate an individual religious proposition and look at it in terms of pure brain functioning is to misunderstand how religious belief functions. And I'll give you a metaphor here. If I take a piano and I play a single note on that piano, and then I play another note on that piano, and I open up the piano and I look inside and I say, okay, in both cases, what we have is a hammer hitting a set of strings. And they're exactly the same. They work the same way. It ignores the complexity of actually playing a piece of music. Although each individual belief might look the same on a neurological level, it's entirely different when you're simply playing a scale or whether you're playing a sonata. Taking a belief in isolation ignores that the brain doesn't do anything in isolation. Neurons are constantly firing in a symphony of thoughts and ideas related to memories, concepts, habits that we have. This isn't anything that Sam Harris is taking into consideration. He's trying to reduce everything down to its smallest comprisable part, and that's how he makes his argument. I don't think that you can understand religious belief until you understand that it all needs to fit together. And even then, if you're just looking at each individual note, you're not getting a sense of all of it. You're not understanding the entire symphony, because you're just taking one note at a time, rather than listening to the entire composition, the story that it's trying to tell. You're also ignoring the fact that the way that people interact with their beliefs is unique for everybody. It's not simply a neurological experience, it's an emotional experience and a spiritual experience. Say that believing there is no God but God and believing that the sky is blue are the same, ignores the context and the meaning surrounding each of those beliefs. Okay, final comment for episode 4 is from Chubbs Peterson. Note, 0 scientific facts, so I should be commended. Okay, Chubbs, I commend you. This video makes me feel gross. You didn't even listen. Nor did you actually take into consideration any of Sam's previous work. Watch this entire interaction again and realize how little Sam was allowed to speak at all. Ben came in interrupting him the whole time. It's a talking head show on cable television. People interrupt each other. That's the format. Sorry, I can't do anything about that. There is a great conversation between St. Gugar from the Young Turks and Sam Harris. It's like 3 hours long. You can watch it on YouTube if you want to see Sam Harris talk without being interrupted. What I really want to talk about is, yes, there's 0 scientific facts. There's 0 scientific facts in your comment. What's your point? I know this is something we'll get to at some point. This ridiculous idea that science is the only epistemological valid way of knowing what ontological reality is. And yes, I'm throwing out a bunch of big words to fuck with you. Look them up. Science is a way of knowing things. It's not the only way of knowing things. Episode 5, oh boy, more from 12 at 5. And I shortened this considerably. It was a really, really long comment. Here, 12 at 5, and I think this is the crux of it, says, why would the majority of Muslims in any Muslim country think that being a good Muslim means saying yes in a poll when asked about killing apostates? Because it is in their religion. which in some places is ignored and in others it is not. Well, hold on a second. This is what I said in episode 5, was that even in Saudi Arabia, they don't actually kill people. The last time somebody was sentenced was in 1993. He sat in jail for 18 years, which is horrible, don't get me wrong, but he's never actually killed. So, 12 at 5. If you want to talk about this as though it happens in some places and not in others, please find me an example, a date, a record of the last time somebody in a Muslim country was killed for apostasy. I would like to talk about that specific instance. And I think this is really important. And it's something that's often ignored in religious texts. And as I mentioned earlier, about breaking the Sabbath in the Talmud, yes, the punishment for breaking the Sabbath is death. However, the Talmud draws some pretty tight boundaries around when you actually get to mete out that punishment. The Quran, dealing with premarital sex, when the Quran addresses this issue, it says, okay, if there is a couple having sex out of wedlock, there's this punishment for them. I believe it's 80 lashes or something like that. And fine, that's the punishment for it. And if you just take that first verse, you would think, oh, premarital sex, 80 lashes, that's that. But it then goes on to say in very explicit detail what the criteria is for actually determining if this punishment can be handed out, which is that at least 4 people need to witness the act in order for the act to be punishable, right? So there's a punishment for it, but then there's also a criteria that says, well, there have to be 4 witnesses, which pretty much means that 2 people just have to be out in the front yard fucking in public in order to actually get the punishment, where like 4 people can randomly be walking by and go, wait a second. The other thing that it says, in addition to that, if you bear false witness about somebody having premarital sex, and you can't find 3 other people to back you up and give testimony, and it's found to be valid, then you're getting 40 lashes. So there's this huge deterrent against even getting into anybody else's business in terms of how they're behaving sexually. And this is what I think gets lost in a lot of this conversation. I mean, we talk about the punishment for apostasy, but you're talking about it as though it's something independent, as though, as Sam Harris talks about it, it's a lever that gets pulled. You believe this thing, but in believing that thing, you're also believing that there's all kinds of rules around it that prevent it from being applied haphazardly. As I said, in Saudi Arabia, if you're convicted of apostasy, you're given 3 years to turn it around. I mean, they'll lock you up, you'll be on death row for 3 years, and in the case of the last guy who actually got this sentence, it was 18 years. And he finally came back around and was like, okay, I'm done with Shiism. I mean, he didn't even leave Islam. He just wasn't a Sunni in a Sunni country. The point is the fact that a law simply exists doesn't necessarily mean it's being applied. And this is certainly true in the United States and across the world. There's all kinds of laws that just never get taken off the books. What I think we need to look at are the laws that are truly unjust and are being applied on a regular basis and consistently being applied, and looking at how they're being applied and talk about that. In addition to that, I think it's very important that those of us who live in the Western world start with ourselves. There's plenty of injustice that happens here in the United States. We have more people in prison than anywhere else on the planet, many of them for unjust reasons. We should be talking about that, not pointing our fingers across the world at situations that we're not immediately involved in and can do very little about, and really lack the sort of insider perspective that would allow us to do anything to make a significant change. So instead of worrying about should we or should we not be critiquing Islam, let's take a look at who we are and what we're doing and figure out how we can be better. Because right now, I don't think we're the best example. Maybe becoming a better example would put us in a position where we can actually help our allies in the Islamic world who feel like they are dealing with oppression. So on that note, I want to read a comment that I got on Facebook, which was not public, so I'm not going to name this person, but she's a friend of mine. She's 22 years old. She lives in Saudi Arabia. And she writes, as a female who was born and still continues to live in Saudi Arabia, I really do not understand why you always attempt to defend this religion. Prejudice is by all means inseparable from the philosophy of this faith. Sexism and homophobia and violence, these things I was taught in my 12 years of mandatory education. If this doesn't tell you that they are part and parcel of the faith, then what does? I mean, I myself, and many I know, suffer here with this extremist Muslim regime. Maybe freedom does not rank high with people who've had it since birth, but some people die for it. I don't want to comment too much on that. I think that her position, living where she lives, and dealing with what she's dealing with, puts her in a unique position. Now, I disagree that her experience of living in Saudi Arabia is representative of the entire Muslim faith. However, given the circumstances that she's in, I don't think it's my position to get into an argument with her about it. I absolutely defend your position to critique the Islamic faith based on your experience of it. Being a young woman living in Saudi Arabia is very different from being a white liberal living in the United States. And how we approach our critique of Islam needs to consider a broader context, because we're not speaking from personal experience. We're not insiders. So it's important that as allies, we respect people who are suffering under oppressive regimes and support them in any way that we can. But at the same time, it does not give us license to make broad generalizations about a quarter of the world's population. So thanks again for watching, everyone. Follow my Tumblr, it's whatiremembered.com. Find us on Facebook, just search for Religion for the Rest of Us, and share us on your preferred social media network. And of course, subscribe. I'll be back soon. Thanks for watching.